Hey, greetings from Texas. Okay, crisis at the ranch. My girlfriend accidentally pumped some diesel fuel into my FJ. Fortunately, I caught it, so there's only a few gallons. Was able to get it back to the ranch. So my plan was, well, first of all, she put a couple gallons in. I had 3/4 of a tank, so I topped it off with fuel to thin out any diesel that was in there. Got it back to the ranch. Thought I was going to be able to siphon the fuel out using a pump, but I've tried different size hoses and you cannot, and double checking on FJ Forum, you cannot siphon anyway with the equipment normal people have out of the fuel filler cap. So instead of pumping the fuel out by bypassing the fuel pump relay, I am going to cut a hole in the floor. So in here is the top of the fuel tank. The fuel pump and fuel filter are actually a unit submerged in the tank. So I'm going to cut a hole. There's a cross member here. Peel that back and I can access the fuel tank through the top, unscrew that without running any fuel through my fuel pump, contaminated fuel through my fuel pump and fuel filter, and I'll siphon directly from there. Then I will put a bunch of fuel injector cleaner and fresh fuel and see what happens. Worst case scenario, I'll have to have it towed and let the pros do it, but I just don't want to drop the fuel tank. It's a pain in the ass. So disconnected the battery. I'm going to mark out what I'm going to cut and then I'll cut it out. Okay, I marked out the area I'm going to cut. I've seen other guys do this and they didn't cut a big enough hole. I'm going to chain drill or stop drill here because I'm going to peel this thing back, and that'll minimize any future cracks from developing. So anyway, also, if I have to replace that fuel pump and filter, I'll be able to get to it from the top. All right. Okay, first things first, I unhook the fuel pump connector. And I undid this harness to get this out of the way. Next, I'm going to lay a wet towel over the top of the fuel tank just to mitigate any sparks that I create. So, all right, I need to get to that lid here. That way, that helps release stress in thin metals. I know because my dad was a sheet metal guy and I was a welder. We were both airplane mechanics. So usually when you have cracks in metal, you can prevent them from going by stop drilling. So, all right, let me cut this out. I disconnected the negative post of the battery, and then I shoved a wet towel covering the entire fuel, as much as the fuel tank as it could, just to prevent any sparks. But I've cut through that section. I started it with a cutting wheel, and then using the Sawzall just goes right through it. It's really thin metal. So let me finish up. I got my my flap cut out. The only issue I ran into is I got offline and ran into this cross member. So I drilled a larger hole so I could reorient my Sawzall blade. And now I'm just going to peel this back. Okay, it's fairly thin. Oops, I got a little dude there holding me back, so let me fix that. I put my wet towel back. I'm going to clean up these edges, knock off the burrs with this wire wheel, and I'm going to put painter's tape so I don't cut myself. All right, so let me clean that up and then I'll remove the fuel lines and the lid to the fuel cap or tank. Okay, I cleaned up the burrs and put some painter's tape here. Vacuumed up any loose debris. I have to disconnect the fuel lines and then unscrew this cap. It requires using a drift and loosening that up. Hopefully that goes okay. And we'll see what happens. So I recommend after I hit that, it's going to knock more debris up, so vacuum as you go to keep from recontaminating your fuel tank. Okay, I cleaned up as best I could with that wet towel. I'm making a note. I took a picture of the fuel fittings, so I make sure I put them on back on the right order. You can see one's color coded. Okay, I'll show you this so you don't mess it up. These clips, like a U-clip, secures that on there. So that's why it was good to clean it up so I could see what was going on. So I cleaned this up. There's these U-clamps, clips. Okay, so I just took a screwdriver, my fat hand out of there. Okay, so don't mess that up. Oh, also use eye protection. I don't know if this fuel line's pressurized or not, so put some safety glasses on in case fuel comes flying out. Added precaution, I'm using these hose line clamps, and there I disconnected the fuel lines. There was a little bit of pressure, so be careful. Okay, next is getting this lid off. I tried using a wood drift and wasn't getting anywhere. As you bang on it though, it's gonna knock debris loose, so keep vacuuming. So I have this big set of channel locks and I'm just gonna try to twist it. I'm gonna have to put the phone down. To grab onto these lugs. Okay, so this is plastic. You don't wanna squeeze that, you don't wanna break it. All right, so I was just using the ends of the jaws to catch on to the surface and spin it loose. I seen other guys hammering on these things, and you don't want to do that. You'll break it. Also, this thing's spring loaded. Okay. All that gunk on there. Let me vacuum that off. Pull this whole assembly out. Now there's a sending unit. All I got to do, two hands. Your thing, you just got to be careful when you pull this out and put it back in, not to bend it. That's your sending unit, or your float for your fuel gauge. Okay, there we are. That's the inside of your fuel tank. I'm going to suck that out. I have a pump that fits on the end of a drill, and I'll empty this dude out and replace it with clean fuel and some sea foam. And hopefully I got home okay, which wasn't very far. Although I did mention that after I realized what my girlfriend had done, I completely filled my tank with fresh high octane gas to kind of thin it out. So if you completely fill your tank with diesel, don't drive it. All right, so here we are. I emptied this sending unit. The gas just, just tip it over. Yes, God. I hand pumped with one of these. I keep one in my Euro motorcycle, just in case. So we're down almost to 0 fuel. So I'm going to throw some old towels in there and soak that up. What I did do, because this line kept curling up, was I taped it to this stick so I could get that hose down all the way to the bottom. Okay, so roughly we got 17, almost 17 gallons out of it. Okay, so it's a matter of getting all this stuff back together. I'll throw some seafoam in here and throw in some fresh gas. Okay, so I'm sacrificing these towels, which I got from sportsmansguide.com for a couple bucks a piece. They're surplus military towels, and I'm just rolling them up and sticking them down and soaking up that extra gasoline. Okay, 2 towels later, and I got 99.9% of the fuel out. So, okay, let's get her back together. Well, a half a roll of paper towels, and now it's bone dry. So that was well worth it. Okay, I'm gonna head to the gas station and get some new fuel. Okay, so I got the sending unit back in, and just don't cross thread that. Make sure it's on very good. You have to depress that spring down, spring loaded. And let me do my connections back up. All right, let me close her up. Okay, so that dude's back in. Everything's hooked up. Okay, some Gorilla Tape. I'm not gonna put this access cover back on yet, because I'm gonna see if my fix worked and get some fuel in it, and if it starts up and runs without dying and I don't have to take it to the shop. So hopefully that's it. Okay, I put in 8 gallons of gas. All that's on. So let's see what happens. I put about 2/3 of a can of seafoam in. So let's see if gas gauge works. All right, let's see. Sounding a little rough. Sounding better.
Look okay?
All right, the only thing I'll know is I'll have to put some miles on it and see if anything happens.
The exhaust stinks.
Yeah. Okay, it's not running rough at all. I'm just waiting. Make sure I don't have any leaks anywhere. And I'm gonna let it run for a few minutes. But you heard it start a little bit rough, but it's smoothed out. And I don't know if I mentioned, but in the beginning I just disconnected my battery during this whole ordeal. Okay, I guess it works. So again, I'm gonna wait, and then I'll put this cover back on. That just shields the sensor unit. There's 2 pieces of styrofoam that go under there. This just pulls back. 2 bolts for each seat. And then the trim piece here, those just snap right in. So that was easy. All right, that's been my experience. There are other videos. I do think my way was better, especially about banging on the lid to the fuel tank. All right, well, thanks for watching.